History and Evolution of Hot Yoga, Part 1. It goes beyond Bikram. It goes before Bikram. Bikram's teacher, who he calls guru, was Bishnu Ghosh. Bishnu Ghosh's older brother. Some of you may not know this, but those of you that are familiar with the famous yogis that came from India to the United States, Bishnu Ghosh's older brother was Paramahansa Yogananda. If you remember, if you're familiar with the book Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda's name at birth was Mukunda Ghosh. So Bishnu Ghosh was Yogananda's younger brother.
I did not know that.
So when I'm talking about hot yoga, I'm not just talking about heating the room, which is now the big thing. This is now the big fad. You have hot HIIT and there's hot aerobics. There's a new fitness chain called Hot Works, and they do infrared heat in all these different rooms and all these different exercises. I'm talking about a particular style of yoga, like Iyengar, like Ashtanga, like Kripalu, hot yoga, which comes from Bishnu Ghosh. Now, Bikram Chowdhury was one of Bishnu Ghosh's top students, and he brought this particular style of hot yoga to the United States. And I had the honor of being Bikram's most senior teacher for over 18 years, and I continued to teach this style of yoga through the Barkan Method. Before we continue on, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell. If you want to learn all about hot yoga flows and tutorials, hit the subscribe button and the like button right now. But now we got to go back to Bishnu Ghosh, because that's really where it all starts. And it really starts in an interesting book called Mejda. Mejda means second oldest. So Yogananda's older brother, Bishnu Ghosh's oldest brother, wrote this book called Mejda about Paramahansa Yogananda, who was the second oldest. In the book Mejda, he talks about how when Bishnu Ghosh was young, he was taken very ill. Paramahansa Yogananda then went on to prescribe, this is interesting, an interesting word, to prescribe to Bishnu Ghosh a series of yogic asanas to help heal his body. Now, Bishnu Ghosh had this miraculous healing. It was so miraculous for Bishnu Ghosh, at least, because it was his life, it was his body. So now he decides to dedicate his entire life in helping others heal their body through yogic asana. So Bishnu Ghosh's main concern in developing this style of hot yoga wasn't so that we could straighten our leg in standing bow and do the perfect standing hit to knee.
It's showing off again.
Even though fitness is a big part of it, but his main intention in creating the style of yoga was to help others heal their body. So instead of going to the acupuncturist or the physical therapist, they went to Ghosha's College of India in Calcutta, which is in the state of Bengal. Now here's something that you may not know. Bishnu Ghosh wasn't just a yoga teacher. He was a gymnast. He taught wrestling. He taught gymnastics, which is a big contributor to the athleticism of his particular approach. But he also taught weight training. As you can see in this picture, Bishnu Ghosh was ripped. But his main suggestion to keeping the body healthy wasn't just yoga. It was a combination of weight training and yoga. So he was influenced by modern athletics, one particular guy named J.P. Mueller. So you can see this picture here, and this is how he came up with the whole idea of doing our version of half moon pose. Now here's a similarity between another style of yoga that's very popular in the West called Ashtanga Yoga, created by a yogi named Pattabhi Jois. When he did his practice with his guru Krishnamacharya, they practiced adjacent to a gymnasium, gymnastics studio. So a lot of his influences for jump backs and jump throughs and arm balancing came from the gymnastics. Same thing with Bishnu Ghosh. Here's the parallel. Even though they're from completely different areas of India, Krishnamacharya was more from the south in Mysore, and Bishnu Ghosh was up in the northeast in Bengal in Calcutta, but they had similar influences for the modern day gymnastics to bring a different dynamic and a different modern athleticism to the practice and to the approach of yogic asana. Another thing that Bishnu Ghosh did different than Bikram, if someone came to the studio, would say they have a neck problem or a neck issue or a shoulder problem or a back problem or arthritis or asthma. He would then prescribe to that particular person a sequence of yogic asana. He would teach them that flow, and they would go off into their own corner and do their own practice. So you have people in different areas of his gymnasium, he had a gymnasium, not just a yoga studio, doing different sequences. What Bikram did when he came to the United States, he changed it up and made everyone do the same postures at the same time. Big difference between Bishnu Ghosh and Bikram. But going back to the Krishnamacharya thing, I think that's really a cool parallel, that here Krishnamacharya very much influenced by gymnastics, and the same thing with Bishnu Ghosh. And now hot yoga, Bikram Yoga and the derivatives, Barkan and some other derivatives of hot yoga we'll talk about later. The Ashtanga Yoga and all the vinyasa that comes out of Ashtanga are most likely and arguably the most popular styles of yoga practiced in the West. They have the similar influences, by modern athleticism and gymnastics, which we took to in the West. In the West, we have a whole different physiology, a lot bigger bones. So the athleticism really took when it came to the United States, and the West, not just the United States, but Europe, Canada, South America, and so on. We got to put Australia and New Zealand in there as well. But I'm talking about the West, anybody outside of India. Another interesting point about Bishnu Ghosh is he was a showman. I always said he was the Evel Knievel of India, where he would put on shows and they would travel through India and they would travel through Japan. He had an affinity for the Japanese culture, I think probably because of the discipline of the Japanese people, and they would put on these yogic shows. He had a whole yogic troupe. At one point, after Bishnu Ghosh died in the late 70s, Bishnu Ghosh died in 1970, Bikram brought the yoga troupe to the United States, put them on television, a show called That's Incredible, where they showed all these different feats that the yogis would go through from this particular troupe that was originated through Bishnu Ghosh, and they would do these insane things. So people said, why was he doing these sensationalized things to shock people? He was showing how the yogi had the power over his mind and his body. And by having this power over the mind and the body, they can stay healthier for long periods of time, way into their old age. So yeah, living longer, the yogi is going to live longer, the Hatha yogi, but also a greater quality of life. And one of the reasons is the movement that we create within the practice. Not just in hot yoga and all styles of yoga, but in hot yoga, we go a little deeper through the heat. We get deeper into what I call the inner core. And as we go into the different ranges of motion, especially in this side twist, we're able to access hard to get to areas. And in so doing, we create this movement for the blood and oxygen to continue to flow, not to get stuck. Because if we don't have that movement, the energy is going to get stuck. When the energy gets stuck, that's where disease and injury occur. So as we continue to open the body, this range of motion, it's a miraculous healing. Now, Bikram wasn't the most senior teacher in the Bishnu Ghosh world. Bikram really found Bishnu Ghosh much later on in Bishnu Ghosh's career. Bikram started with him when he was 3-4 years old. But there was another yogi named Buddha Bose who wrote an interesting book called Key to the Kingdom of Health. However, Bikram was definitely one of his top students and definitely part of that circus troupe. One of the things that they would do as they would travel through Japan and India, one of the things that Bikram did, he had a motorcycle drive over his chest while he was laying on a nail bed. Another feat that they would do, they'd have a steamroller roll over Bishnu Ghosh's chest. Another yogi, when they came to the United States, named Pandey, he had an elephant walk over his chest. So how are they able to do these feats that would kill the average person? Because of the breathing technique that Bishnu Ghosh called Shatoli breathing. It was influenced by Paramahansa Yogananda's technique, Kriya Yoga, to get the skin to change its structure. So instead, when you're laying on the nail bed, instead of the nails penetrating or impairing the body, the skin would stretch over the nails. That's how Bikram was able to do the motorcycle on the chest. So once again, they were sensationalists. Paramahansa Yogananda would refuse to ride in the car with Bishnu Ghosh was driving. And Bikram is the same way. You never want to get in a car when Bikram is driving because he's a maniac. And I used to always say, Bikram, you're nuts. What are you doing? He'd say, look out the side window. You're a baby yogi. He was a crazy driver. So one of the things that separates hot yoga, Bishnu Ghosh's hot yoga, from other styles of yoga, one of the main things beside the heat, we'll talk about the whole idea of the origin of the heat in part 2 in next week, so make sure you stay tuned to the next week's part 2 video of history and evolution of hot yoga. But beside the heat was the alignment concepts, and one thing that Bishnu Ghosh developed was the curvature of the spine, to round forward in rabbit pose, standing head to knee, standing separate leg head to knee. It was a different concept than down south in Mysore. Another difference is names of postures. So names of postures, alignment concepts, it's a different concept of the yogic asana. So now Bikram, like I said before, one of Bishnu Ghosh's top students, first starts teaching in Mumbai. Back then it was Bombay. Then he moved to Japan. Like I said before, Bishnu Ghosh had an affinity to Japanese culture, so he sent Bikram to Japan. Then from Japan, Bikram went to Hawaii, then San Francisco, and these are short periods of time, and eventually landed in Beverly Hills, California, and that was pretty much his home, and that's where he staked his claim and made his mark in the hot yoga world. So our next episode, we're going to talk about Bikram and the whole evolution of hot yoga in the United States. So that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Hit the like button, ring the notification bell. You want to learn all about hot yoga, flows, tutorials, factoids. Hit the subscribe button and the like button right now, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.